Hi, my name is Nehemiah Reese. If you're a student at Northern Oklahoma College like me, you've probably seen the white sculptures on campus for some time now, and I've decided it's time I learn a thing or two about them. And if you watch the rest of this video, you might learn a little as well. So let's get started. First on the circle, you're going to see the Muse. It's a beautiful sculpture. She's the one who sits in front of Wilkin Hall all day. She enjoys playing the flute and sitting. And I think here is a good time to throw in some ukulele. Next, we've got the scholar. She's not as playful as the Muse. She just sits in front of the administration building, and she's really into her latest book. You can see she's dressed quite nice. Farnoosh told me on the phone that she's actually his sister was actually the model. Well, for the dress anyway. Later you'll see about what Audrey Schmidt had to say about the model for the face. Next on the circle, we've got the huge buff dude, the sculpture named The Athlete, who stands in front of the Foster Piper Fieldhouse. He's a big white guy who is never getting tired of holding this torch. And here we have the guy who started it all. This is the graduate sculpture, placed directly in front of Central Hall, right in the dead center of the campus when looking at it. He's standing up on top of his ball and a little book there, and he pretty much just stands there all day. So we have these 4 sculptures on our campus that I don't really know anything about. I called the campus to see if there was anyone who I could talk to that did know anything about them. And that led me to Audrey Schmidt, and so I decided I should interview her, so here's that interview.
The sculpture, if you notice, they're all white, and that was done to mimic ancient sculpture, such as you would find in ancient Greece or Rome. So, although they're not marble, of course, they're made out of concrete cast in molds. So that look is very what we call classical style. You know, some would call that old-fashioned. Of the 4 sculptures, the graduate was the first one made. And if you notice, it's not really on the drive, it's out in front, sort of the front part of the campus, with Central Hall being seen behind it. The graduate was made in 1985, and all the sculptures used NOC students as models for them. And the graduate was modeled by a Native American young man. So that was the first one made. The scholar, which is the reader, the female reader over in front of admin. The scholar, of course, you know, she's got a book open, so she's doing academic exercise. And she was also modeled. She was modeled after an NOC student at that time who is now an instructor. Her name today is Laura Marshall. I know the model for The Athlete, and his name was Eddie True, and he was a young man from Tonkawa who modeled. I think he was also athletic, so his body type was appropriate for the athlete. This all happened in Creative Arts Building. At that time it was called the Industrial Arts Building, and it happened in the East End, which is still a garage. That became the artist's studio, and both artists, Farnoosh and Farshad Lanjani, were students here, and they were students who were doing employment for the campus, just like students help in many ways on campus and get some funding for that. They were students who needed jobs. They were born in Iran. I think they moved to India when their families moved to India when they were young boys, and then they came to America to complete their education. And so this was in the mid-'80s. I wasn't here on campus as an employee, but I had my store downtown, so I met these young men. They would come by and get supplies, art supplies from the store. And so I used to come out and watch them when they were working on the sculptures. The students would pose for them. They would model them. It's called modeling, building up the surface. They would model those in clay. So the size that you see them today, those were originally done in soft clay, modeled with the students posing for them. That took quite a long time. And I think the 4 sculptures took 2 years to get them all done, which was probably about the length of time they were here as students. Well, so, they were literally doing janitorial work for their jobs. And the president of the college then, who was Dr. Ed Vineyard, and one of the boys' instructors, his name was Gary Perks, somehow came to discover that these boys had this talent, this ability to do art and to do sculpture. They weren't art majors. They were here, if I recall, getting just a general education degree. And so they discovered that they had this ability, and before you knew it, those 2 young men were making sculpture instead of cleaning toilets. And so for their 2 or so years here as students, that was also being produced in their off time. So they worked, as I said, they worked with the models. They made those models in clay that you see. They then had to make master molds of those clay pieces. This is a very involved process. A master mold out of plaster material. Many, many, many pieces. It's not like just you would pour the plaster over it, because it all has to come off. And so they made master molds, and then when that mold hardens, those mold pieces are removed. Then the clay is ditched. It's no longer functional, so that goes away, and they put that mold back together. It's now hollow on the inside, and then they poured those with concrete. So that's how the concrete forms developed. You probably have researched, but both Farnoosh and Farshad are living in Ohio. They are in the Columbus area. Farnoosh, I know, is an active painter and has a studio space and sells. Farshad, I believe, also is still involved in art. But they were born in the late 50s, so they would be in their late 50s now. So they're not, ancient men. So I think it would be interesting to try to contact them and invite them back to campus one day.
From my interview with Audrey, I gained a lot of useful information about the sculptures and the sculptors. She had mentioned that they were still working in art, and it'd be interesting to try and contact them, so I thought, why not? Immediately after the interview, I went home and called every number I could for Farnoosh and Farshad, but unfortunately I didn't get any answers. Well, for a few hours at least. Not 20 minutes before class was about to start that day, I got a call back from a number in Ohio, and it was none other than the great sculptor, Farnoosh. I began to talk to Farnoosh about the sculptors, and he agreed to let me record it for an interview for this video. Here's that recording.
Yes, we were studying, and we were taking the general subject, and my brother and I, we were looking for jobs actually, and but we had studied the sculpture in India, which was a 5-year course, and we finished 4 years before we came to the United States. We thought that it's a good opportunity to see if we can make these sculptures for the campus. So we talked to President Vineyard, and we talked about it a little bit, and so he said we want something more traditional, something more classical. So we came up with a few ideas and took pictures and showed him. We got the green light. For the flute player, we took a picture of maybe 2 different girls. That one, we made it without the drape. We did it nude first, but the pictures were not done nude. We did the drape when the clay was done. We wanted to make it nude, but the president said, no, we don't want nude sculptures here. He said, okay. So the idea was to make it nude first, and then put the drape so that the folds and everything would fall very natural, and it's a special technique that we wanted to try it and see how it works too.
So there you have it, folks. That was about 9 minutes of information about the sculptures on the campus of Northern Oklahoma College. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned a little bit, and I hope I get a decent grade for this project.